What's up, guys? Game number 2 of the Elite Eight, the second game that'll be taking place Saturday night. This one will be in Las Vegas at T-Mobile Arena. This one will be an absolute barn burner between two teams that I think could actually win the national title. 3 seed Gonzaga, 4 seed UConn. The spread in this game is UConn is actually favored by 2, and the over-under is 153.5, so expect a high scoring game. And I can see why, as both of these teams can score and Gonzaga doesn't play much defense. But these two teams had completely different Sweet 16 games. You look at UConn. I actually didn't watch a single second of that UConn game because I was too busy watching Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson put on a show in the Garden. And by the time I was getting ready to watch the UConn game, they were up by 20. They were up by 25. They ended up beating Arkansas 88-65 behind some really good performances. Jordan Hawkins had 24 points. Andre Jackson Jr. had 7, 8 rebounds, 7 assists, and Sanogo, 2 blocks, 18 points, 8 rebounds. They absolutely controlled the game against Arkansas. And they've honestly, other than that first half against Iona, they've controlled basically every part of this tournament run for themselves. They obviously dominated Iona in the second half. St. Mary's, I felt like they controlled the game the whole time. And then Arkansas, they absolutely shut down that Arkansas team that was coming in hot after beating Kansas. They held Ricky Council only 4 of 12 shooting. Nick Smith only put up 9 shots. He ended up having a better game though with 11 points. Anthony Black in 37 minutes, he put up 20 points, but they did a great job of keeping that Arkansas team at bay. So UConn is looking scary right now, and that's probably the reason why they're favored by 2 in this game. Gonzaga, on the other hand, they have just had an absolute wild tournament. They struggle in the first half against Grand Canyon, similar to UConn, take over in the second half. You look at the TCU game, struggled for a lot of the game, was down for a lot of the game, ended up pulling that one out by 3. And then this UCLA game last night was absolutely wild. They get dominated in the first half, go down 13, going into the break. Drew Timme can't be stopped, though, in the first half. He ends up ending the game with 36 points and 13 rebounds. An absolute crazy game from Timme. But then they absolutely just dominate the second half, and they're up about 8, maybe even 10 points with just about a minute left, and they miss free throws, and they turn the ball over. And UCLA ends up taking the lead with 13 seconds left on an Amari Bailey 3. Timeout called by Gonzaga. They go the other way. They do a Chris Jenkins play from the national championship when Villanova won it all. Julian Strother steps in from the logo, knocks down a 3, his third 3 of the night. Take the lead. They end up taking the lead by, at that point, it was taking the lead by 1. To take a 1-point lead, UCLA goes the other way, turns the ball over. Gonzaga hits their free throws and ends up closing out the game. But that's what you're going to get with Gonzaga. I mean, this game that they're going to play on Saturday night is probably going to be, it's going to want to give Gonzaga fans heart attacks. Like, let's be honest. This Gonzaga team is insanely talented. Drew Timme is having a great tournament. Strother, he had his 3 threes in that game. He's averaging 15 on the year, 16 last night. He grabbed 10 rebounds as well. And then honestly, the breakout star from last night was Malachi Smith, the transfer from Chattanooga, who I've actually forgot transferred to Gonzaga, given he comes off the bench. But he had 14 points, 6 rebounds. I really liked Malachi Smith at Chattanooga. Actually had Chattanooga in the Sweet 16 last year. They obviously ended up kind of somewhat choking against Illinois in the first round last year, but that's for another story. But I was honestly disappointed to see UCLA go down. I had UCLA winning it all. I love the Jaquez, Tiger Campbell, Amari Bailey trio. Gonzaga probably loses this game if UCLA is just 1/3 better, has 1/3 better health than they did. They were obviously knew they were missing Jalen Clark, but a late scratch in Adem Bona, huge. That's why Drew Timme was able to absolutely cook, because he was going against Kevin Nwaba, who averages 1 point per game on the year and averages only 12 minutes, who actually, this is going to sound wild, but I thought Nwaba did a pretty good job against Timme, despite Timme scoring 36. And then you had like Mac Etienne come in, um, and was just absolutely atrocious in his limited 4 minutes. So again, Gonzaga is a team that can win the national championship based on their offensive alone. but their defense really concerns me. I did like how they were able to clamp down in the second half, but then we just see multiple spurts in that second half. Just the final 2 minutes, they absolutely break down. They can't hit their free throws down the stretch. They can't close the game. And that first half was just atrocious defense. I have to think Sonogo is definitely going to be the hardest matchup for Timmy this tournament, and maybe even the hardest matchup for Timmy all year. If I go back to this schedule for Gonzaga, and I'm just going to pull up Timmy's game log because obviously Gonzaga's played a great season, great schedule this year, but in his games against his best opponents, I mean Texas, he put up 18 and was only limited to 10 shots. Purdue, he was going up against ED Baylor. He got some good defenders on Baylor. He only had 9 points in that game. But Sonogo is going to be probably the best defender he's faced all year, and by far the best defender he's played in the tournament. I think Timmy's still good enough to get his, but if they're going to have to rely on Timmy like they did last night against UCLA, I don't think Gonzaga wins. They're going to need a big game out of Strother. Despite Strother having 16, they struggled to shoot from three as a team, and he kind of struggled too. I mean, he was obviously he had two big threes down the stretch. He was one of six up until then. On the other hand, UConn hasn't really had that moment in the tournament where they have to close out a game because they've dominated in all three of the games. So I think there's storylines for both teams on why you pick the other team. But honestly, I think I'm going to lean UConn in this game. And I think I want to take the under. I like Connecticut's defense a lot. I mean, look, they're holding Arkansas to 65, holding St. Mary's to 55, Iona to 63. None of those are Gonzaga offense by any means, but I do like UConn's defense in this game, and I think that's the reason they're going to play. They're going to win. Now, you could look at me and say, well, UCLA had a great defense, and Gonzaga obviously was able to exploit that. Well, UCLA was missing their two best defenders, and we all knew Clark was going to be out, but if I knew Bona was going to be out prior to that game, my pick probably would have been different because UCLA absolutely had zero big bodies that they could throw at Gonzaga. So, with that being said, I'm going to take UConn in this game. I think that Sonogo is able to slow down Timmy enough, and I do think the only way that Gonzaga wins this game is if you get a big night from Strother or Timmy. Timmy's could end up with if Timmy ends up with 5 assists or more, I think Gonzaga wins this game because that means he's getting the ball. Gonzaga's or UConn's either doubling or forcing the pass out, and the others are making the plays for Gonzaga. If Timmy doesn't have those assists, I think that means that the others aren't helping. They're not knocking down threes, and UConn ends up winning this game. So with all that being said, you heard my pick. I'm going with Gonzaga in this game. I think they move on to the Final Four. Or I completely just said the wrong pick. I'm going with UConn in this game. Give me the Huskies to return to the Final Four for the first time, I think, since they won the national championship with Shabazz Napier. So give me UConn. I think they take down the Zags. However, I think this is going to be a wild game. I'm going to be super in tune with this one. It's going to be an interesting storyline. It's the Sonogo versus Timmy matchup. Who's going to do better? I think Sonogo does enough to slow down Timmy. So give me UConn in this one.